so excited and thrilled today to have on the Good Enough Mompreneur Podcast Angie Weber. She's the founder of the Parent Toolbox, creator of the C.A.L.M approach method to parenting, and the director of the Divorce Support Collective and host of the Mom Essentials podcast. You have a full plate, and I love it. Angie helps parents move from overwhelm and reactive parenting into calmer, more connected communication with practical tools that actually work in real life. We're going to be talking about emotional regulation, breaking generational parenting patterns, navigating stressful seasons with more calm, and how moms can support their children without losing themselves in the process. If you've ever felt overstimulated, emotionally exhausted, or like you're carrying the weight of everything, this episode is going to feel both validating and empowering. Welcome to the podcast, Angie.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited about this conversation. I love talking about emotions.
I do too. How we do one thing is how we do all things. And if we improve our parenting, we're going to improve our business skills. It's all connected. That's why this podcast is a holistic podcast. We are not entrepreneurs in a vacuum. And so it's all connected. It all fits together. And so I think that this conversation is well placed. It belongs here, and I can't wait to dive in. I want to ask you so many questions, but what are you seeing with how moms are feeling that they have to hold everything together all the time, and we're silently feeling overwhelmed?
Yeah, so you kind of already hit on it, like in the beginning of, you're feeling overwhelmed, you're feeling emotionally overstimulated, you're carrying everything. And as moms, I think a lot of us can relate that we kind of feel like we have 47 Google tabs open at one time in our brain, right? Like we are constantly doing everything. And I really appreciate the fact that you kind of mentioned like how we do one thing is how we do everything. When I was in marketing, which was my first career, I had a business coach. And one of the quotes that I always remember her saying is that we don't have personal life and professional life. We just have life. And so I think it's really easy though, as moms, because of so many of the external messages that we hear. I mean, as soon as you get pregnant, right? People are like, oh, get ready to never sleep again. And we get overly consumed with these thoughts of we have to be burnt out. We're always going to be busy. We're never going to sleep. We're not going to find time for ourselves. And people just label that as normal motherhood. But the truth is that's not what motherhood is supposed to be like. And so I think we get really trapped in these messages that we hear. And then nowadays we also are combating social media where we're seeing these highlight reels of these quote unquote super moms that seem to have it all together because they have the perfect family picture and all of their kids are perfectly matched. And, maybe one of your moms listening is sitting over here and like, my kid can't even put on matching clothes like normally. Like, how do they have it all together? The truth is they don't. We all have messy as moms. It's just that our messy looks different and we can't compare ourselves to those social highlight reels that we see because that's not real life. That's curated into what people want us to see.
Yeah, it's so true. And I'm sure we'll get into this. If something seems less messy to somebody else, it's because they're intentional about it. Yeah. And they're focused. They know, hey, like for me, I know, and it took me a long time to learn this, that we have to have a group chat like physically before we go somewhere and talk about like this time we got to go. And it still doesn't go as planned, but it took us a long time to go, we really need to review things before we go. So everybody is like kind of okay. Yeah. But it comes with practice and it's a learned thing for many people. It's not like you're just born a great parent or not. So I think that that's important. Don't think just because you feel like you don't have it together, you can't get there. But so many of the things that plague us is being in that reactive mode. I was talking about how we learn to plan. So I don't think a lot of parents realize what that is. So can you talk about how that really is the default for so many parents?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll kind of, preface that with saying that we live in a really reactive society. So it's no wonder that even with our parenting, we're reactive. Because if you even think about health wise, it's, oh, I have a stomach ache, now I'm going to take care of it. Or, oh, this is wrong, now I'm going to take care of it, versus being preventative. But again, we have all those tabs open in our mind. And if we're running a business at the same time, we have an even more on our plate. Or if you're working full time, we have so many different hats that we're wearing. And so it's really easy to get into this motion of being reactive because we're constantly living in this fight or flight mode that we don't even realize because we've probably been living in it for so long. So reactive parenting is really, when you're snapping at your kids, when you're being irritable, when you're constantly living in that shame and guilt cycle of, why did I do that again? I said I wasn't going to yell and now I yelled. And sometimes we get so overwhelmed and focused on that, it's hard for us to take a step back to be like, okay, what's really going on and how can we be more proactive? Like having conversations before we go places. And it is a learned practice. I always tell my parents, it has taken us a lot of little steps to get to where we are. And it's going to take us a lot of little steps to get us to where we want to be, because changing behavior is really, really hard, and it's going to take practice and a whole lot of grace and patience with ourselves as we, try change those habits and become more proactive with our parenting so we can have better relationships with our kids.
Behaviors that you've learned over your entire life are not going to change overnight. It's going to take at least, it might even take the entire time that you've been living to, the fact is progress over perfection. The awareness is just half the battle, I think.
Absolutely. No, that's such a good thing. And, what I hear from parents a lot that I work with is very similar to this phrase. I don't want to parent how I was parented. So it really comes back to breaking some of those generational cycles. And I also say, let's not shame our parents for what they did, because literally the tools that they handed down to us, they were handed down from their parents, who were handed it down from their parents. And so it's just been these generational habits that we see as kids and then we bring into adulthood. It's just that now we have so many more opportunities and so much room for support to not necessarily even replace, but to upgrade the tools we have in our parenting toolbox so we can make different decisions, so we can be the parent that we want to be. And again, without shame to our parents, but we have the choice to make these changes to feel more confident in our parenting as well.
Yeah. And if we don't want to be in that reactive mode, we really have to try our best to be the master of our emotions and regulating our nervous system. And I've had doulas and early childhood experts on the podcast who've said we start to co-regulate as early as 6 weeks with our children. So can you talk about, for somebody who just isn't aware of how important our own emotional and nervous system regulation is to setting the tone with everything that's happening in our families?
Yes. So emotions are very contagious. They're kind of like a domino effect. And so once one person has it in the house, it's easy for everyone else to pick up on it. But it's, again, not surprising that we're living in this deregulated state because, again, no shame to our parents, but we heard a lot of messages growing up of, why are you upset? It's not a big deal. Don't get angry. Don't let people see you cry. And what that did when we were little children is that these emotions were coming up and we were trying to express them and project them. And we were being told these messages pretty much that you're wrong for feeling that way. So we never were given the proper tools to say, oh, well, when I'm angry, which is a completely normal emotion, everyone gets angry. It's not a bad emotion. We were kind of told and we thought, oh, well, I'm wrong for doing this or feeling this way, so I'm going to shove it down. And as we continue to age and even into adulthood, even now when those emotions come up, we don't know what to do with them because it's uncomfortable. And really, it means that we stop becoming in tune with our body because our emotions are always sending us cues. And so I love working with parents to tell them 5 different check-in points that they can do to start becoming curious and aware when those emotions are coming up, so we can make more proactive decisions and create healthier coping skills in order to express them. And just like the emotions, like let's say anger is contagious in our house, the wonderful thing is so is calm. And so when we can be the calm in the storm, then that's when our kids are co-regulating. But we really need to be the first one to make that change if we ever expect our children to adapt those behaviors too.
Yeah. So let's hear those 5 check-in points,
Yeah.
because I love to give listeners actionable takeaways from our conversations.
Yes, no, I'm so glad that you asked and want me to share with you because this was a huge game changer, kind of like how I approach parenting too. And I think it's so valuable for other parents to know. So again, I want to say though, we're doing this out of curiosity, not shame or guilt. And it might sound longer as I explain it, but as you do the scans, it's going to become pretty intuitive. And so when you first start out though, don't be afraid to just write down these notes or put them in your phone and go back to it later to be like, okay, now I can start recognizing these things. So the 5 different check-in areas is first, you're going to think of what are my body sensations right now. So is my stomach getting tight? Is my face getting flushed? Is there a bunch of tension in my shoulders? Like where is it actually showing up in my body? The next one is body movements, because emotions are energy, and sometimes they just need to get out. So we wonder why our kids, get really crazy after school. It's because they've been pent up all day and they're finally in a safe environment where they feel like they can go wild, right? So looking at like, do I need to move right now, or does my body feel really heavy and kind of weighted down where movement feels like a struggle? Then think about the thoughts that you're having, and not even just, okay, is it negative self-doubt talk, or are there other kind of thoughts coming into my mind, but also the pace of them. Again, when we have all those tabs open, it's not uncommon for us moms to feel like we are constantly having thoughts thrown at us where we can't even really comprehend what's going on because they're like a waterfall. Then you're going to look at your emotions. And I know that sounds very basic, right? Because your listeners might be like, yeah, Angie, I'm angry right now, or I'm sad right now. But sometimes feelings can mask each other. So I always encourage parents to like dig down a little bit deeper, see if there's something at the root cause. Maybe it's not that you're angry. Maybe you're feeling really self-defeated or inadequate because you couldn't do all the super mom things that Susie down the road seems to be doing because she's putting it on her Instagram page. And then the last one is are your senses, your 5 senses. So doing a check-in and figure out, okay, what senses are heightened or what senses are dulled right now. So I know it's so common for parents of, they want their kids to change from one thing to the other. So maybe their child is playing in the living room with some blocks or coloring stuff, and they say, hey, it's time to go, do this, go clean your room. And we say it once and they don't listen. We say it twice, they don't listen. Soon enough, we find ourselves getting a little bit louder and thinking, why aren't they listening to me? Well, they're so focused in on what they're doing. Their hearing actually might be dulled in that moment because their sight is so focused in on what they're giving their attention to. So once we're able to kind of figure out those body scan of those 5 different areas, we can then become aware of what patterns are happening. Is it a certain time, place, people, things that are starting to give us these cues more and more when these emotions come up, so that again, we can stop them before they get to too high of an activation level where it's harder to come back down to what I call our sweet spot of emotions. But the other beautiful thing is as we start adapting this as parents, if you have younger kids, and even my kids who, are almost 12, I'm not going to sit down with them and say, can you tell me what body sensations you're having right now? Because they look at me and be like, What are you talking about?
Right.
But instead, we can kind of guide them and say, can you tell me one thought you're having in your brain right now? Or can you point to your body where you're feeling this most? And it not only helps them strengthen that own intuition with themselves, but it gives us a lot more clarity as parents to understand, like, oh, like they're really anxious right now. I know they're getting outside of their sweet spot of emotion. So how can we bring it back together through co-regulation, through healthy coping skills, so that we can both come back to this calm state?
Yeah, and just to tell listeners, even though you might be aware of all the things we talked about, it's not a guarantee that it's going to diffuse a situation. So I love that you give some pointers. Just don't try to have a conversation and work it out logically in a moment where people are feeling activated.
Oh my gosh. And I think in our brains as adults and as moms, and again, we have so many things, we're always looking for these quick, easy solutions, right? So we think like, oh, you're angry right now. I'm going to just tell you the rational thing to think, and you should be all better. And why aren't you better? It's kind of, I'm sure everyone who is listening here has done this. Have you ever tried to push on a door that you have to pull? Like it doesn't work, right? Like you just kind of feel embarrassed. It doesn't get you anywhere. That's the same thing when we're out of our sweet spot of emotions, when we're dysregulated, we really have to calm down into a better state before we can expect any change to happen, especially with our children. Like just yelling at them when they're not listening is not going to make any progress, or when they're upset, we really need to come back. And I always suggest people too, like, I love talking about safe and healthy coping skills, and sometimes we need to practice those outside of the times when we're dysregulated so that it becomes more second nature to us. I remember my daughter was in the bathroom one day and talking about how it doesn't always go perfectly. She was in the bathroom. She was upset with me about something. I don't know. I was like, I could tell that she was getting dysregulated. I was getting dysregulated because it was morning time, the rush to get them ready for school at this point. And I started standing there and I started doing deep breaths. And she goes, I know what you're doing and I don't want to do it. And I was like, I'm just breathing. And she goes, well, I'm not going to, so it doesn't work perfectly all the time. And the truth is we're still going to lead from emotion sometimes. But if we can start putting some of these practices into play, the rate of proactive parenting versus reactive parenting is going to outweigh it.
Yeah. It is, yeah. And as we talked before, once you decide that this is how you want to be and how you want to parent and change those patterns that maybe you were brought up with, it becomes easier and easier over time. But for somebody maybe just starting out on deciding to change how they react in those activated situations, what are maybe some of the hidden signs that they may be getting dysregulated in the moment that could be helpful to go, oh, okay, maybe that's when I should step back?
Yeah. Well, I kind of correlate this a lot to the pause, right? We hear about, in however the framing is, like, oh, you just need to pause before you react. And so many moms I talk to are like, yeah, sounds great. I can't do it. Like, I don't know what you mean by pausing. And so again, it's those little practice things. Try 1 second first and then react. And then next time, try 2 seconds. And then, build up from there. And you might be at 10 seconds being like, I got this down. And then all of a sudden it's like, I'm back at 1 second and I couldn't do it any longer than that. Like that is just, it's parenting. It's human nature. So, again, I would say like the irritability, starting to check in where it's coming up in your body is so important, because we can feel when our shoulders are getting tense or when our stress level is getting high. We just need to tune into it more. But if you're constantly too feeling that guilt and shame cycle of telling yourself, I'm a bad mom. Why did I yell again? Oh, why aren't they listening to me? Like, again, come to everything with curiosity and not shame or judgment, because when we're curious about stuff, we can see things differently and we can create different patterns.
Yeah, and that curiosity, I don't know, it will just serve you so well. It can help you realize it might not be your kids even. Maybe it's a situation that triggers you, that you have a reaction to. And so maybe it's I think so much we're like, okay, our kids need to do this, that, and the other thing. But that curiosity opens up, okay, well, maybe there are things I need to work on too. And I think that's for all parents. It's just we're all a work in progress.
Yeah.
So I think that is really helpful. So you mentioned the calm approach to parenting. Have you already talked about what the elements of that, or do you want to talk about that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I've kind of already incorporated a
Yeah.
little bit through our conversation so far, but I'll kind of just briefly share what it entails. And I always say it's an approach, not necessarily a style, because there's a lot of parenting styles out there. I think there's a lot of good pieces to some of the parenting styles. And I also don't believe that there's a one size fits all because every family is so unique and different. I'm a twin mom. I have a boy and a girl, and I know that I need different tools for my daughter than I need for my son, even when I want the same outcome. And so it's really important to us to understand that we need to kind of tailor things that's going to fit best for our family because every family is unique and different. And so that's exactly what I do with the C.A.L.M approach. There are 4 different pieces. Every letter stands for a different foundation pillar, and we really tailor it to the parents that I'm working with. So the C stands for compassionate communication. So obviously we talk a lot about different communication styles, different way of talking, like mirroring, the help versus herd method, things like that. And I also love to incorporate how can we connect better with our children and just as a family as whole. I love that you and your family talk about things before you go places because that's, again, we're so quick and, we're running from one thing to the other. But when you take that quality time to really sit down and focus, I'm sure it's helped out in so many situations. And I'm a huge component to family meetings. That's a big part of the compassionate communication. And then A is for awareness and accountability. So this is kind of 2 parts. And this is really where we dive into that curiosity piece, especially when it comes to the behaviors that our kids are having. Because our kids tell us what they need through their behaviors and actions, even if we're not really understanding them. We can take a step back and we can become curious and get to the root cause of things. And then the accountability piece, that goes into more of the consequences and discipline, which yes, discipline is a huge part to parenting because that means to teach. It is not focused on punishment. It is to teach, to discipline. So we talk a lot about setting up choices and consequences, whether they're natural or they're enforced ones. L is all about learning emotional regulation. So really diving into that dysregulation, how to understand when our emotions are coming up. And then M is mindful modeling. So my whole goal is to change the saying of do as I say, not as I do, to do as I do. Because our kids are watching us all of the time, even when we wish they weren't, and they are soaking up those behaviors and those traits of ours that we are going to see eventually in them. And so we want to make sure that we are really modeling the best behaviors, whether it's even as a mom, like the self-care stuff, having our own identity as a mom, or the safe and healthy coping skills. There's a mommy wine culture is, and I love a good glass of wine sometimes, but mommy wine culture is, you had a bad day, open up that bottle of wine. Like, it was so stressful. You deserve that second glass. You know what? It's already open. Just finish the bottle. It's been a bad day. And our kids are then internalizing that as, when I'm stressed out as an adult, what I'm going to do is drink. And so they start making those correlations. So we want to make sure we're presenting really safe and healthy coping skills for our children so that they don't repeat any survival coping skills that they're seeing from us.
Yes. When my family started seeing me pace in the backyard without my shoes on, they were just like, what are you doing? So yeah, it is. There can be lots of different things that you can do. And I think this whole conversation is just focused around the fact that as parents, the stakes are so high and we are modeling that behavior. And so it's just so important that we try to do better and be better as parents. It's so important. You mentioned breaking those generational patterns that so many of us have been brought up with that we wish were different. But it can be so hard to know how to be different, especially when we're carrying a lot of guilt and shame. So can you talk about how maybe we can start to rewire that behavior and that story that we're telling ourselves that makes us feel so guilty and shameful?
Yeah. So first we need to become aware of it, right? Again,
Yeah.
without judgment, without shame, just putting it all out there, becoming curious of why do I think that? What are the thoughts that I'm thinking? The activity that I love to do with moms as well is when we have these negative thoughts of I'm a bad parent or I'm repeating these cycles, is I tell them just write it down on a piece of paper. Make it into two columns, write it down on one side. Put all the things that you think about yourself. And then when you're again in a calm state and you have a chance to really reflect on them, the other side is going to be your evidence side. And that is going to be the evidence to disprove all of these beliefs. Yes, maybe you are taking things from your childhood, and the beautiful thing is you can choose to leave them behind now. Or maybe there are some things from your childhood and your parenting that you grew up with that you do want to continue on with your kids. But really using that evidence list of, oh, I think that I'm a bad mom. Well, the evidence is that I take care of my kids. They're bathed, they're fed, they're to school on time or the places that they need to be. They tell me how much they love me and how much I love them. And when we can create this evidence list, or if it's a folder of something, when we're having those negative beliefs or those thoughts, we can go back to that list to be like, no, these are the reasons why I know that this isn't true, because our brain loves to play tricks on us. It loves to tell us things that aren't necessarily true, but it's our responsibility to make sure that we're not listening to it when that's happening, that we're going back, we're disproving it, we're reminding ourselves of all of the amazing things that we're doing. But again, we have to get curious. And so even when it's breaking generational cycles, sometimes I think that makes it sound that we had to have some horrific, trauma in our life. And that's not necessarily true. It doesn't mean that our childhood was traumatic. Like, I had a great childhood. I was very blessed. I have two amazing parents, have been married for almost 45 years or so. And I can thank them for a lot of the stuff that they gave me. And I can look and say, when it came to emotions, we didn't talk about it. It was swept under the rug. When things, happened that were bad, my dad would go into fix it mode. And that's exactly what I did when hardship came in. I didn't want to process. I didn't want to feel. I went into fix it mode right away. Well, what that did is that just bottled up those feelings and those emotions. And I'm going to tell you right now, it seems like a good idea at the time. But sooner or later, they're going to come up and they're going to come out with a vengeance. So we need to just kind of, again, realize like, what do we want to change? And then keep reminding ourselves that it's okay and go back to that evidence list. And I would say the other really important piece to all of that is making sure you have a solid community around you that you can be vulnerable and safe with and grow together with.
Yeah. Yeah, and everybody's trauma is relative, Don't compare your trauma to somebody else. If it was a difficult childhood for you, no matter what it was, your mom forgot to pick you up at an early day or, forgot it was purple shirt day and that was really upsetting to you, then that's completely fine. I think we too compare our trauma to other people and don't think it's valid. And a lot of healing happens in putting pen to paper
Yeah.
and just getting those emotions out. So I think that that's a really wonderful idea. So another thing I wanted to make sure we talked about too was communication and what that looks like. And you've talked about some of that, but we often have to help our children through transitions and sometimes co-parenting and things like that, whether it's dealing with a difficult teacher or coach. Can you give us some tips on what that communication can look like? Because I think that's a place where parents really have to grow and struggle with, like, what do I do now?
Yeah, and it's so hard for us as parents, right? Because we
Yeah.
see our kids struggle, like again, whether it's with a teacher or it's through a friendship problem, like those are the worst, right? Because we see our kids
Right.
hurting. We hate
Hmm.
it. We want to take all the pain away. And of course, we've heard of the concept of helicopter parents, right? Where they're hovering over their children all of the time. But years ago, my husband and I were at a church sermon and they were talking about parenting, and he brought up this term that I'd never heard before called a lawnmower parent or a snowblower parent, bulldozer parent. So there, I guess maybe it depends on what part of the country that you're in. But pretty much the basis of this was because professors from college were getting calls from the students' parents being like, why did my kid get this grade? And they're like, but they're in college, like they should know how to communicate with me about this stuff. And so really a lawnmower parent, we'll go with that terminology, is the parent that wants to mow out all the obstacles for their kids. So they never want to have them have any hardship. They want to make it easy because it's, we want our kids to thrive. We want them to be happy and have a great life, but we're actually doing them a huge disservice when we do that, because if they don't learn how to overcome things, then they're not going to know how to handle it when we're not around. And that's where some mental health stuff can come into play, maybe actions that they don't think out because they're just running solely on emotions. And so it's really important that at a young age that we start teaching our kids this kind of stuff with problem solving. So again, let's say that they're having a problem with the teacher. Yes, we can step in when it's appropriate and call the teacher if the situation is getting bad. But what we want to do is we really want to set the kids up with ways to solve the problem and brainstorm with them at an age appropriate level, of course, of how they can also solve the problem. And that's where the help versus herd scenario comes into play. So again, as parents, we try to fix everything when really our kids just want to come and tell us something and they just need that space to be held for them. So instead of jumping in, which when we do that, the kids might tune out and be like, oh, I didn't really want help, Mom. I just wanted you to listen. But they can also, if we start throwing out situations and solutions, they might think, oh, gosh, Mom must think I'm so dumb. Like, of course I already tried that, or that's not going to work. Instead, we literally ask them, do you want help with this? Or would you like me just to listen? And if they do say that they want help with the problem or the situation that's going on, instead of jumping in with a bunch of fixes, what we can do is, again, problem solve with them. Well, what have you tried first? What do you think will happen if? How about a different solution? Can you think of any other things? What if you go and talk to the teacher? And so then we start getting their brain activated. And this works really well with sibling bickering too, because I know that's no fun in houses either. But again, when we approach it with curiosity and some problem solving skills versus just fixing it for them in those situations, we are setting them up with a lot greater skills than if we just solve everything for them at first glance. So then they never have to figure anything out themselves.
And that's something I do is I'll be like, do you want me to write them or what would you like me to do? And so, yeah, that can be really powerful. Don't just go into fix it mode, like you mentioned, having a conversation and brainstorming ideas and, even in the moment, just realizing like, we don't have to figure this out right now. That can be really powerful too. Like, let's sit with this.
Yeah. I like to say, put it in our parking lot. So this in those kind of situations, but also, those like late night questions when you're like just finally ready to go to sleep and your kids come in and are like, what are we doing 2 weeks from now? Like, what is that really important right now? But instead, like, let's put this in the parking lot and we'll revisit it later. That can be really helpful too.
I like that. We've talked about so much with parenting and skills, and I don't know if you have any thoughts on this conversation is so important because, like we said, when we improve our parenting, we're improving all aspects of our life, including our business. But how does that nervous system overwhelm and being dysregulated affect us as parents and our motherhood and business and ultimately our relationships? Because I think when we have an idea of the stakes, we can put more focus and intention behind doing the hard work.
Yeah. When we have a dysregulated nervous system, it's going to affect everything, not just our parenting, not just our business, not just our relationship, if it's with a partner or our friendships or with a coworker or boss. It's really going to go over everything. Even if we feel like we're really good at wearing those hats at a certain time, again, it's going to end up flowing into each other. And so it's just so important to remember your nervous system is the center of everything. And it's really amazing thing. Once you find out, if you have been living in this fight or flight mode for so long, when you learn how to come back to that sweet spot of emotion, how different, how clearer things are, how less stress you are, how much of the mental load you don't have to carry anymore. And again, that's going to improve in so many areas of your life. And I've given the Calm approach talk to many different types of groups, from parenting groups to mental health professionals to women entrepreneurial groups. And all the time people say, oh, wait, I see how I can apply these strategies to different parts of my life, because it really is about staying grounded and calm and really having that great connection and communication with whoever we're talking to, again, whether it's in a personal or a professional setting. And so we can choose to live in this state. We can choose to have our nervous system dysregulated. But again, if you're already feeling overwhelmed, if you're feeling depleted, if you're feeling frustrated constantly or irritable all the time, is that the way you want to continue living? Wouldn't you rather do the little bit of hard work and those baby steps to get to a place that you are calm and you can enjoy the things that are going on in your life? Which we could go off on so many different topics about that, but it's really a choice. I always talk about choices with kids too. Do you want to do this or do you want to do that? Most of the time they choose the right choice, but sometimes they don't. And there's always going to be a consequence to our choices. So do you want to continue living how you are, feeling depleted and dysregulated and emotionally drained day in or day out? Or do you want to choose to really understand and sit with those emotions, as hard as they are sometimes, to have a calmer life and to have more peace in your everyday life? The choice is really, up to the listener of how they want to continue on.
I really think that's one of the things that our children want from us the most, is the calm, and to be that person that they can come to when they're having that tough situation. And so if we're more of a master, I don't know if you're ever a complete master, but yeah, as long as we're working on it and we're setting that tone, it just makes such a difference in how secure your kids feel, and in sharing those times with you and knowing that you're not going to be playing off their emotions and really being the thermostat in the room.
Yeah, and I always tell parents too, like, our kids, especially when it comes to the co-parents that I help, because that's a whole nother situation. But our kids don't want a perfect parent. They just want us as their parent. And really quickly, talking about how our kids, they want us to be the gauge in the room. I was on vacation with my kids, and one of my best friends, she is their godmother. So we were on vacation. We were out to eat one night. And there was this family sitting in the booth next to us. And the mom was getting really upset with, she was probably like 7 or 8 or 9 years old. And the conversation pretty much went like this. The child didn't want to eat what was in front of her. And the mom's reaction was, Dad told me that you weren't going to eat that. And I told him that you would. And now you're making me look stupid because you're not eating that like he said. And you're ruining this for everyone. And my heart just broke for that child, because I'm thinking, what are all the messages that she's been told right now? And also the parent is putting all of this emotional weight on their child versus taking ownership of her own feelings. And my daughter looked at me and goes, "Thank you for not talking to me like that, Mom." So like, oh, I get teary-eyed when I think about it, because even though we don't think we're doing a lot or making a big impact, like those moments when our kids recognize that, when they know that we're the safe place to come to, all of that makes all of this work so impactful. To be able to hear our kids say stuff like that, like, "Thank you for doing this." Unfortunately, we don't want it because some other parent is doing something that we don't like, but it's those little moments that you can really see the appreciation for being that calm in the storm, and which, okay, does not always work out perfectly. I still let my emotions lead sometimes, but we're never going to be perfect.
We all do. I know. I could talk to you forever. We could go on so many tangents. But if listeners are like, okay, I need to make some changes and I want to make some changes in my parenting, what are maybe a few small shifts that maybe they could make this week to create more calm and connection? I think that that's so important, and that's, those two C words are just what children crave.
Yeah. So first, start with the pause. Again, even if it's 1 second, just start with the 1 second and try build up from there. The second one is to really make sure that you're tuning in with yourself. Again, just become aware of what's happening in your body. If you're really stressed out in the morning, just again, do that scan, see where it's showing up so that you can, again, start becoming more in tune with how those emotions are kind of building so that you can stop before you get to that really dysregulated part. And then thirdly, I know we didn't talk about this a ton, but just one quick thing that you can do is have a family meeting. Just 15 minutes, one of the days. It's a great chance to get your family on track, get everyone on the same page, especially so mom doesn't feel like she's holding everything together, and start opening up the conversation, asking some questions, looking ahead at what the week is, planning out meals together, going through what needs to be done around the house versus feeling like you're nagging everyone all the time to get it done. Those 15 minutes of connection can make a huge difference on how your week goes.
Yeah, and listeners are going to be hearing this right about the time that school starts, and we're going to be planning to do that. And so that just makes such a big deal when you talk about after school plans and homework and new schedules and after school things, all of that. It can make such a difference. So I hope that this lands with those parents that need to hear it to have a calmer start to the school year. I love it, Angie. Where can listeners connect with you and learn more and get your resources?
Yeah, so they can go to theparenttoolbox.info, and there they can get connected with me. They can follow me on social media at the Parent Toolbox. I also offer a free call, so free coaching call for a half hour. They walk away with 2 or 3 more tools, again, that they can start implementing right away.
I love it. It's so important. Definitely reach out and find those resources because it can be better. I think we get stuck with how it is and we can't imagine how it can be better. As somebody who's made dramatic changes in my own life, because of my entrepreneurial journey, it made me be a better parent, I think, and a better person. So it's absolutely possible. So I love that you're offering that up to families and it just trickles down. So thanks for that.
Well, thank you for having me on.
Yeah, thanks, Angie. A great conversation.